Welcome to Inspiring Possible. I'm Christy Pennison, former stuck person turned therapist and dream consultant. Are you feeling stuck, overwhelmed, uncertain, or just need a little inspiration? Then I want to help you gain the clarity, confidence, and courage to create possibilities and live a life you love. Because folks, life's too short to be miserable. Welcome back, Inspiring Possible listeners. I hope your week is off to a fantastic start. But even if you're stressed or overwhelmed or wherever you're at in the week, maybe it's the weekend for all I know. Maybe you must be a listener that listens on the weekends while you're doing some gardening. That sounds really nice. I don't garden, but that sounds like a good idea. And if that is you, then thank you for coming back and staying tuned. And so today, I don't know if any of y'all have ever had these perfectionistic tendencies where you just want to get it all right. And you have in your mind this picture of what things should look like or how quickly it should get done by. And if things don't go according to plan or they don't end up appearing like you thought it would be, then maybe you just think it's all for nothing. Well, if that's you, please stay tuned because I have somebody today who is going to share a little bit about their story, but hopefully also allow you to reflect a little bit on your story. And if perfection is holding you back, then maybe we can find ways to strip that off a little bit. So I'm really excited to welcome Courtney Youngs to the show. And we're just going to be talking about all kind of things of not getting it perfect and how to move through that. So welcome, Courtney.
I love that. And speaking of not getting it perfect, I can't garden to save my life. So we've got so much in common.
I can't either. Yes. Oh my gosh. There's stuff that I aspire to, Courtney. And then there's things that I'm just like, okay, this maybe is not for me. And it's maybe somebody else's gift and talent. Okay.
Yes.
Now, I
Yes.
appreciate people that know how to garden. If you want to give me any of your vegetables out there, if you're listening and you live in the central Louisiana area, please, let me know. I will eat them, but, gardening, not so much.
Exactly.
So, Courtney,
well, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
well, thanks. So tell the listeners a little bit about, maybe start off with your story and why you're here today and why you're passionate about kind of what you talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So for background, I am a corporate PR person. So I've been in the trade for about a decade. I am a happily married wife, a mom of a beautiful baby boy, and I'm actually expecting our daughter in 2 weeks. So that
really?
is,
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. A little bit about me on the high level. And then part of my story, which has led me to here today, is that 2 months ago, I published my first book. And I published my first book because, as you alluded to at the beginning of the call, in my late 20s, I found myself in a really weird place. I was a perfectionist. I say was, I still am. I'm an ongoing recovering.
Really strip off that. I really do find that really true perfectionists, people that I've known in my life, this is a journey to let go of the perfectionism. It does not happen overnight. So would you say that's true for you, Courtney? Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yes. I would say the one difference between today and when Courtney was in her late 20s is that I'm well aware of it. To the point, and I'm actively working against it, because in my late 20s, I actually went through a divorce. I did what felt like a major career change for me. Both things obviously completely unplanned on my part, but real. I lost my grandmother, which was not part of my perfectionism and planning, of course, but it was equally traumatic to all the things that I had, watched unfold. And I just found myself in this weird place. I was really proud of the life that I had built, and then equally confused when I picked it apart to build it back differently. And so because I'm a communications person by trade, it wouldn't surprise you likely that I like to write, I like to talk, I love stories. And so I really started processing my own story and talking a lot and writing about it, and then started and stopped through the years. And then when I welcomed my son into the world, I just had this prayer on my heart, right? Like, how do I use what I've been gifted with to do something good in this world? And it was like a lightning bolt. And I knew I had to finish the book. So I wrote the book kind of thinking, truthfully, at the end of the day, I would just print it as a Word document and give it to my son someday. And then it evolved into such a bigger and more beautiful journey. And that's what's led me here as now a published author. So I'm really excited to talk about
Yay!
that and talk more.
Yeah, well, tell me because I mean, I think you bring up something that I would say happens to more people than not is that, we grow up with this idea that there's this certain version of how life should us you should very like lucid in quotations like how it should work out like in
Yeah.
our minds and like you said and sometimes you strive really hard to keep in control all these different things whether it be like this relationship or this life
Mhm.
that I've built or this job that I've been able to work my way up in or whatever it is. And then when you have those moments in life where it all just kind of tumbles down and
Mhm.
it gets stripped away and then you have to figure out, wait, what the heck just happened, anyways? Because this was not my plan for my life. But then you have to recalibrate and plan kind of, and I don't want to say plan, but like envision a different version of what life
Mhm.
could be like, maybe free from expectations that might be
Mhm.
really lofty. And maybe that's the way to
Mhm.
say it. How does one do that? Or how did it work for you?
Well, I laugh because I'm like, if only there was one answer, right? I think the
Right.
reality is that it looks very different, feels very different for many of us, but I actually think it happens all the time. I think we are
Mhm.
constantly meeting and figuring out and coming to terms with, in some cases, new versions of ourselves. Whether it's on the more extreme end, like some of the things I've mentioned, or you just get to a place in life where you want things differently for yourself or for the people around you, and it looks different than it did 5 years ago. Like, I think life is a continuation of that. And I think every time you think you have it figured out, at least in my experience, you don't, right? There's the next
Yeah.
version, the
Speak
next
truth.
chapter.
Speak truth, Courtney.
Right, right. Honestly, the minute I think I have it figured out, I start to get a little nervous because I'm like, here it comes. Where's the curveball?
Mhm.
But I think it's so beautiful because I think life would be really boring without that. At least in myself, I know that even though some days I'm like, yeah, I wish, it could calm down any day now, right? I know that if I had it figured out, I'd get bored. And
Yeah.
I'm an introspective person by nature, which is how I started writing and all of this came to fruition. But I think that life is really for the messing up, figuring it out, and getting the chance to do it all over again if we're lucky enough in some cases. And so, what does it look like for me? I can answer that at that point, I made, and through the inspiration of bees, which we can talk about, and the book I wrote, right, the Waggle Dance, I kind of made this decision where I'm like, you know what, no matter what it looks like, how it turns out, obviously, I'm not going to get it perfect. Good track record on that one. But what I can do is make it purposeful. And I think you make it purposeful because each time you go through these experiences in your life, no matter how big, small, or in between you think they are, I promise that you are learning something from it, either about yourself or about the situation and or the people that you experience it with, right? And what you learn is kind of this like life package and gift that you can then give to somebody else. And that to me is such a healing and a freeing concept, right? That I don't have to get it perfectly. Step one is I'm going to have to experience it. I'm going to have to live. We all are doing it every day. And then the catch to that is like being so present and intentional about thinking about what you're taking from it. And honestly, the less perfect, the more messy, the more unplanned, the better. They make the better stories, they make the better lessons, and those are the ones worth sharing. And so that's what it looked like for me then. And even I've changed since then again, right? I became a mom. I'm about to become a mom again in some ways. And I'm constantly thinking about like, what would I tell my daughter about this someday? What would I tell my son, which was the inspiration behind the book? And I think that's part of what it looks and feels like to me. And certainly that's the place where like I come alive and I become a lot more purposeful and motivated in it.
Yeah. Well, and as you're talking, I'm just thinking it's kind of like how to find purpose in the messy, right? Because it's not perfect. It is typically more messy than we probably give credit for. And I say messy from like feelings to things not going according to plan. to people coming and interacting in your life in ways that you could not have foreseen. I think a lot about just kind of like the devastation recently from like some of the hurricanes that people
Mhm.
experienced recently. I mean, there is stuff that's going to come into your life that's going to either knock you down, make you bend over backwards. It's going to take you by surprise. And it is how you find purpose in that. And I think about my own story in a lot of ways that there was a lot of things that were messy. My life didn't not go as according to plan. Like when I was in my very early 20s, I had this very clear idea of how life was going to be. And I can assure you 1,100% that it did not go the way that I thought it was going to go, had a lot of unexpected things happen. But if you look back, as you're saying this, I'm thinking about it. If you can assign purpose to something that you went through, and you can find the purpose in whatever you overcame, then it can sometimes be a gift to other people
Yeah, it
in the
is.
sharing of how you overcame, or how you got to where you are at now, or how you didn't give up, or how you were able to make it through.
Yes, and I always think about I think I can say with a decent level of confidence that we have all been in a moment where either by our own admission or just by coincidence, we're sitting across the table from someone and they give us, excuse me, the gift of like, hey, I have been there too.
Mhm.
Or I am there with you right now. And how immediately alleviating that is to know that it's really not just you. We all have things, right? Some of us have been through such similar experiences. And so that moment where you can be the one that reaches across the table with your hand out saying, like, hey, I've been through what you're going through. Let me tell you what worked for me or how I made my way through. Like that to me is the secret sauce of life.
Yeah, well, and it gives hope that because I think there's situations in life that can seem pretty hopeless that you
Mhm,
can maybe find yourself in. It maybe could be a job that you lost after, I don't know, 20 years maybe
mhm,
working somewhere, or, you wake up tomorrow and everything that you worked hard to build is not there anymore,
mhm,
or a relationship you felt really solid about, and, you find out things about somebody that you would have never guessed in a million years, right? Like all of those things. I always interpret it like, and this is the visualization that comes to my head is, we walk around on like what seems to be very solid ground through our day to day life. And I don't know if you've ever been in a earthquake. Have you ever been in an earthquake, Courtney?
no, but I wanna knock on wood, so go ahead.
Okay. And I hope you don't, but there was this one time I was in, it was an earthquake. It wasn't like the buildings are falling down and everything is going crazy. But I remember had to be, how old was I? Maybe like 19, 20-ish years old. Okay. And I was visiting a friend in a different country. And I can vividly remember me and her sitting on this couch. Okay. And the place that we were staying didn't have much. Okay. So, but there was a couch and an old school TV sitting in front of us. And we were watching some kind of like, I don't know, cable show or something. To think about where we are now, technology from even like 20 years ago is a big stretch for me.
Even
Okay.
10.
But I
Yeah.
was sitting there on the couch and I remember I looked over to her, and she's British. So she has this accent going down. And I said, Becky, are you shaking the couch? Because it just never occurred to me
Yeah.
that the ground
Yeah.
was moving. Okay. And then it starts shaking more. And then these girls that we were staying with and visiting, they were like getting underneath the door, uh, the door frames. And they're like, it's an earthquake. And we're like,
Ugh,
what? Because we're like, we had never experienced anything like this. And then we hear the glasses shaking or whatever. Okay.
yeah.
But long story short, as we get under it's going to be long anyways. We get on this door frame and eventually it, the earth stops shaking, right? And we are, thankfully all in one piece. Nothing really happened. There might have been a few broken glasses. And then there was a few tremors after that over the next, I think, day or so. But in that next day or so, when we would walk around, we were always questioning whether or not the earth was going to move again. And
Mhm.
throughout our whole lives until this like 19, 20-year-old self, we had never questioned that
If the
what
ground
we
would
knew to
shake.
be true was going to be different. And
Yeah.
I think of that story and think that it often applies to our lives because I think we sometimes have these perceptions, like we talked about at the beginning, of how life is going to go. And sometimes we don't always know what to do when it starts shaking and we've never experienced it before.
Yeah, it's true. Often, even sitting here today, I would not be surprised if something went a little sideways next week for me, and I'd be like, "What am I?" Your instant human reaction, right, is not often one of like complete calm and confidence. But I have found it to be a quick mind shift set for me, or shift, I should say, mindset shift. When I'm in those moments, big, small, earthquake, a little wind gust, whatever you want, to just instead of kind of trying to one, perfect or control the outcome or worry about it, which is next to useless, like just really be present in the Courtney, what are you learning from this moment? Or just holding on to the belief that I will learn something. And that to me is kind of what I cling to when the ground
Like, this
starts
is all gonna
shaking.
make sense one day. I'm going through
Yes.
this. I don't know
Yes.
why. It's all gonna make
Yes.
sense.
I'm going
I
to
just
bring it
don't
all
know it.
together.
That's so
Yes.
crazy to think about though, because I've been in those places too where I'm like, "Ah," but it's helped me through. And hopefully if you're listening, this can help you too. Like there are things you've been here. We're not telling you any kind of thing that you haven't probably already experienced in life. But I think if when you are going through those hard places, if you are able to acknowledge and be present with it and say, maybe this sucks or this was unplanned or this is uncomfortable, but I just have to cling to the belief that one day this will make sense
Mhm.
why I went through this. I don't know about you, Courtney, but that's helped me move, like you said, more purposeful
Yeah.
in life to not necessarily hang on so much to the fact that this did not go how I want it to go, but more of a shaping or a molding or a letting go, a surrender, whatever you want to call it, that
Mhm.
I am just being open to knowing that maybe a bigger reason for this than I can see in this moment.
Totally. It becomes not how I think things should go. It becomes trusting how they're going. Like it's just,
Mhm.
and for, anybody who is a perfectionist, or I always say I'm the type A planner of them all, it is a big challenge and it's a good challenge to have. But I think that there is both freedom and purpose in kind of honoring it and leaning it in for sure.
Yeah, well, I wanna hear more about these bees that you're talking about and maybe how these bees helped you. I don't
Yes.
know if they helped you embrace life more, but I'm
Yes.
really curious about this bee story here.
Yeah, so I have to be really honest. I know one thing about bees, and that is this.
Okay.
I am not a bee expert, but
Thank you for that disclaimer. Not a
I
bee expert, but I have
I'm
a bee
worried,
story.
right? Because there are bee experts. And I'm like, I just have this little slice of inspiration that has shifted the way I live my life. And I'm really grateful for the bees for that. So, but anyway, I mentioned the weird place I was in my 20s. And at the time, I was talking to a good friend of mine. And I had, again, this like kind of like calling on my heart. I'm a writer by trade. Should I be writing about all this weirdness? And there were a lot of people who would have said yes. And I was like, I don't think so. I don't think that's it at all. But I was reflecting on the experiences I had, what I was learning from them, what people had poured into me up until this point in my life, how I could take it and kind of give it forward, right? Like, surely I wasn't going to be the last one going through some of these things. So, how could I, like I said, reach out my hand to someone else? And so I'm talking to the good friend, and she says, Well, Courtney, that sounds a lot like a waggle dance. And I was like, she's very smart, way funnier than me. So I am like, What? And she's like, a waggle dance. It's what bees do to help each other survive. And I was like, you have my attention. Go on. She's like, well, bees will go out and they will look for things like food, water, shelter, and then they will come back and they will literally do this like figure 8 waggle dance for their bee friends so that their friends know where to go get these things. And that's how bees, in a very broad, sweeping summary, survive. And she's like, so it kind of sounds like you want to write a waggle dance. And I was like, yeah. And also, haven't talked to many bees lately, but I'm pretty sure they're not worried about being perfect. But it sounds like they're really living with purpose. And that feels a lot better. And so that's really kind of how I wrote the book. I just framed my life like a waggle dance. And then when my son was born, his name is Braxton, he became my little bee, right? So I then thought about not just what have I learned, but what would I want my son to know if I couldn't be around someday to tell him myself about these experiences. That's kind of how bees shaped my life, my book, and how I'm trying to parent my children now. So I owe a lot to them, truthfully.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you owe a lot to your friend who like introduced this
I
story
know.
about the
Yeah.
and then the friend took it a step further and said, I challenge you to maybe write a book.
Yes. Yes. I've got really good people in my life, a lot of which, her included, that I wrote about because that's the goodness I wanted to pass forward. So
Yeah, well, maybe that's a good question is how important do you think it is to cultivate relationships in your life or good people that can kind of, because like bees, again, I'm not a beekeeper. I do know a person that may listen to this podcast that does know a lot more bees about bees than probably we do. Okay, Courtney. But they do they live in a hive. They don't
Mhm.
live by themselves.
Mhm.
They work together, it's a collective unit.
Mhm.
But it sounds like you had some really good supports. And how would you say people that may be struggling to move through challenges in life that may need to cultivate closer relationships so they can have that? I mean, how has that worked for you in your life?
It is my life. And I don't mean that to be cliche, but I have such a deep passion and love for the people that are in my life because I just feel so grateful for them. And I have lived in 5 different states across the past 10 years. I have had friends in my life since the 4th grade. I have friends that I met 2 years ago. I have friends, in summary, just from so many different seasons of life. And even though I live very far away from the majority of them now and have over the past decade, our relationships are more beautiful than ever. And the same with my family. I haven't lived geographically close to my family in over a decade. So to me, relationships are everything. And I believe that at my core. I believe it in my professional career. It's where I invest a lot of time and energy, and certainly in my personal career. And I think, again, different seasons, different friends, different reasons, right? Like not everybody serves the same purpose in your life, but they are there for a reason. And so I think anytime it is just anytime you're going through anything, good, bad, somewhere in the middle, it is such a blessing to have people around you who know you and who genuinely want the best for you, both as a source of reminding you that that's there, who you are, who they are, what is possible, and also to offer different perspectives and challenge ones you have. I think that is just as healthy. And so I think for me, having strong relationships is such a cornerstone of my life. It is certainly one that I will instill in both of my children, because I think at the end of the day, it is largely what life is all about.
Yeah, well, and I know this is not what we set out to talk about, but I am
No, I
just
love it.
curious and leaning into this conversation because I do find, and you've had a challenging experience, like you said, some of these friends I've been geographically, family members I've been away from for a
Mhm.
decade. And, what I've hear a lot about is that, there still are people that really struggle to cultivate some of those friendships, how they struggle to maybe stay in touch. What
Mhm.
are some things that you have found helpful for you to be intentional about cultivating those, whether it be new friendships from
Mhm.
moving to a different place or to maintaining relationships that may not be in a close geographical distance?
Yeah. So you said one of the words that I was going to go to in intentional. I think the most beautiful thing about long distance relationships, friendships, what have you, is that they become very intentional. And so for me, I can't say that I reach out to every friend or family member on a regular basis. But when we do connect, I'm intentional about it. I want to know what's going on. I'm an open book. So I share in return. And I just make sure that the time we spend together is really meaningful, either on the phone or in person. And in fact, I often talk to my family about that, right? Like if I lived down the road, I'm not saying we wouldn't have a great time together all the time, but like I cherish the time we have together so much because it is so different and a lot less frequent than I think either of us would like. And then in terms of new friendships or forming new relationships, my kind of golden rule is like, you've got to show up as you are. Like, you've got to be authentic. You've got to trust that. You've got to kind of lay your cards on the table. And that's really vulnerable and scary. And I don't think it gets any easier the older we get. It might get
No, I
harder.
think what I hear is it gets harder. Yeah.
It does get harder. And I've experienced that even in my last move, but nothing feels like, to me, that's the only option, right? Like if I want a genuine relationship, then it's kind of on me to show up as a genuine contributor to that. And then just kind of trust that the right connections will be made when and how they're supposed to be made.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I was just curious of how you have navigated that because, it's something that I hear more and more of just
Mhm.
people struggling. And like you said, the older you get to establish relationships, to be intentional about those relationships. Because a lot of times when you're in that season of maybe your children being younger or
Mhm.
you are busy with life and career and
Mhm.
family. And I know that one of the Regrets of the Dying, by that book by Bronnie Ware that I may have mentioned on this podcast before, but one of them was I wish I spent more time specifically, not just with family, but with friends
Yeah.
and cultivating friendships outside of maybe your immediate family, which family is great, but that also extending that past. And so thanks for diving in and kind of going in that
No,
direction and answering that.
it's the
Yeah.
life I live.
Yeah. And not everybody, like you said, you've had to move a lot in
Mhm.
pretty short amount of time, right? And
Mhm.
not some people can set down roots somewhere and they may stay there for the whole of their lifetime, or they may move one place, two places, so I think that might be a skill that I'm hearing that you might have even learned is
Yes.
if I want friends, I'm going to be intentional about it. If it's whether it's
Yes.
maintaining the ones I have or making new ones, and I need to know that I'm going to have to do uncomfortable things, put myself in situations, show up as I am, be vulnerable, and just trust that my people will find me.
Totally.
And
Totally.
then if
Yes.
I
And
find them, I'm going to cultivate that so that way, I don't have to go this alone and we can, have these experiences together and I can have people in my corner to do the hard things with. So,
and you can be in theirs. And I just want to say, like, I don't think any of us are often looking for more things to add to our to-do list, right? So to
right.
me, it's not this like, oh, I must do this, check in,
Let's
make
call
these
5
friends.
people this week.
Right. Like, because honestly, my most favorite friendships are the ones that, like, unfortunately, time does pass and it's weeks before we can connect, even just with a quick text, but they're exactly as I left them. I just think that there's a lot of groundwork to get the relationship to that point, right? Like, that's a
Yeah.
sign of a very matured, kind of set in stone friendship when it doesn't require the frequency becomes less important, right? Because the
Yeah.
intentionality was always there from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, and it's just something to consider. And I do think that yeah, it requires going through life and you have to be able to have sometimes time, experiences, a foundation to really be able to build that sense of trust. And then like you said, if you haven't heard from me, I still love you, but
Yeah.
we'll catch up when life allows us to kind of meet back in the middle. So
Totally. Yes.
was there any in your book, any kind of maybe unique life experiences or lessons that you've learned that you feel you'd really want to share?
There's so many. I mean, that's what the book really is all about. But the one that it's truthfully the cornerstone of my life is I mentioned my grandmother at the top of the call, and I grew up, and I think a lot of grandmothers say this, but just for the record, like, it'll always be my grandma on my heart who said it first.
I just want it to be known, okay, and
I'm pretty sure
recorded
it was
right
mine.
now.
I'm pretty sure, and don't tell me differently. But I grew up listening to her tell me that this too shall pass. And I think I remember it clearly enough that it was probably in a moment of frustration or sadness as, like, a 10-year-old, right? And she very lovingly, in a grandmother way, was like, Courtney Ann, this too shall pass. But she said it all the time. Like, it just became this natural conversation piece. And after she passed, I remember holding my son one morning, and the to-do list was going off in my head, and I really wanted to put him down so I could go get all this stuff done. And I remember looking at him being like, oh my gosh, this is going to pass too. Like, there's going to come a day where I won't be able to look down at him asleep in my arms. And, like, I just needed life to stop for a second and pause. And so I think coming out of all of that, I mean, my grandmother was like the best person in my life for 26 plus years, even into recent. in her physical absence, what I've learned is that it all passes. It's all just a summary of memories at the end, which is freeing and horrifying all in once. Because I think every day I am just having this feeling of not wanting to wish any of it away, even when it's hard and overwhelming and the burnout is there, right? Like I don't have a shortage of things going on in my life right now, but it has caused me to just hold life so tightly in the best way and trust all of it, the mixed emotions, the mess, the less than perfect plans, etc.
Yeah. And it is so true. I heard once before, like, how can you appreciate the moment you're in, even if it's less than perfect, like you said, because there may be a moment in your future that
Mm-hmm.
you are sitting in the thing that maybe you wanted. And, we talk a lot about like how to create possibilities here. So you could show up one day in this vision, dream, goal that you had once had on your heart and it become a reality. But somebody has said, sometimes to acknowledge where you're at right now, don't take for granted where you're at right now and be able to see the gift in that, because there's one day that you may get that thing that you're wanting and you're actually look back and you're missing that part of life,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think about this because recently I had an experience where for many years, I'm going to be honest and just be very transparent here. I was very single for a very long time. Okay. And I would date people and nothing would really work out. Or people used to say, "What is there something wrong with you?" And I'm like, "No, I don't think there's something wrong with me. I think I'm cool." Okay. I
Right.
just don't think I used to always say, I just don't think I've met the right person yet. And so I'm in a season of my life where, I mean, if I may be so bold, I really do think I've met somebody who is,
Yeah.
very compatible for me. But it's so weird because I can remember hearing that, like, at one point, you're going to get to this point in your life where you're in this situation that you've always wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And you still might be like, "You know what? I've loved this moment. There were things about that last moment that I actually
Totally.
liked too." Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yes.
But it's crazy. And I think that's where it comes with kids too, because you were talking about your boy. How old is he now?
He's going to be 2 in like a
Okay.
month. And by the way, you might have just heard him crying, and I'm really sorry about that. I forgot
Oh,
to.
no, I didn't hear
Okay.
him crying. No, no, no. And
Okay.
like you said, when you were saying like, and I was looking down at him and I was thinking to myself, like, this is going to pass. And I have a teenager at home, Courtney. Okay.
Oh,
So she's,
so you can confirm
she's
it passes.
about to be 16. And in my
Oh,
mind, I was thinking, oh my gosh, yes, it passes so quick because I can't even remember that. So, what I love about what you just said that I'm taking away from it is that, this too shall pass. And that is a gift to remember through the hard things. But I think this too shall pass and trust it all and take it in is also a reminder to live life to the fullest and embrace what's happening in the now,
yeah.
because we won't get to go back. Like, you can't be like, I can't
There's
make
no
my
rewind.
16-year-old daughter, yeah, about to be 16, be like, be a baby again. You know what I mean? And there's some things about the baby phase that I'm like, yeah, don't be a baby again. You know what I mean?
We're
But
good with that
it's that,
one.
yeah, it's like that, I don't know, what is it? The waxing and waning, like the in between of like the push and the pull of
Yes.
like, sometimes we want life to get to where we want to go. I just want to show up there. And it's, how do I really learn to just be present in this journey and say, I'm going to get there if I get there, when I get there, but I don't want to miss this right now. Because
No,
like you said, it's scary all the same time, but also like reassuring that, yeah, I'm going to be left with my memories.
that's it.
And
Yeah.
that's it. And
Yeah.
who knows
My
what
husband and I
who knows what we're
actually.
carrying into the afterlife. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I ain't been there yet.
Right. I know. Me either. Again, I'm going to knock on wood. I'm not ready.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
not ready. I got a life to live, God. I got a life to live.
if the ground starts shaking after we hang up, I'm going to be beyond freaked out. But
No.
my husband and I, like, no joke. It is just truly, I literally have it tattooed on me, but it is like tattooed on
Mhm.
my heart and brain. And so we talk a lot about the concept. And many years ago when we started dating, we decided, we're like, you know what? We are never going to say the phrase, I can't wait. And it's probably been 5 years. And I promise you, I have not said it since. It's like taboo in this house because we together have been through some really, challenging times. And there was definitely a desire for those challenges to ease and us get to the next chapter of our
Courtney, I'm
relationship.
speaking life to you. I'm not trying to speak anything,
Thank
speak
you.
life, speak life.
Thank you. Thank you. So we are definitely, we do not say, we look forward to things in this house, but we can wait.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. It's like we look forward to it. And, and if the reality is, we're all, I think when I think about the brevity of life, it does remind me to be grateful in life.
Mm-hmm.
And something that you said earlier, I think about sometimes I reflect because I have this passion planner. I don't know if you ever had one of these before.
Oh no,
But
I love it.
it's like one of those written planners, okay? But what I
I
love
love
is
a good
there's something
planner.
me too. Now, do I use it consistently? No. Okay. There'll be like, seriously, there's like months missing where there ain't nothing in there.
Not
It looks
me.
like there's nothing to happen in my life.
You were in my planner today, girl. I write it all down.
Yeah. But one of the things that I love, because one of the things you said earlier and I'm going to tie this all together in a nice bow for you
Yeah.
listeners, okay? Because is the fact that it is about embracing our unique life experiences and then reflecting on what am I learning this season. And I think you're a writer, and it sounds like you have really been able to get not only your stories out, stories that you want to leave to your children, stories that you don't want to, the life lessons that you want to pass on. And I think some of this reflection piece is a lot where it's at. And I do appreciate this passion planner because they do have questions in here like, what was the most memorable part of my month? Or what are the
Mm-hmm.
biggest lessons I'm learning? Or what am I most grateful for? Or who am I most grateful for? And how am I different between last month and this month? And, what am I most proud of? And just those moments of like those reflection, those getting it down on paper, you sometimes all of a sudden realize, man, I was complaining all day today and I have no idea what I'm complaining about because I have woke up on the right side of the ground.
Right.
And number two, there's all of these things in my life that I'm missing because either I'm not slowing down enough or I'm not being attentive enough or I'm not being as intentional enough that are really incredible. So, Christy, you might be going through hard, but there's still some great things you're going through at the same time. And so it's hard to find that balance, that mind that wants things to sometimes be a certain way.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, Courtney, if there was one, I say lesson that you would want to go back and tell younger you, or I'm going to mix it up a little bit today, or the one lesson that you really would want your children to know, and you probably wrote it in the Waggle Dance book, okay? But what's the one thing that you're like, if I could leave either younger me or my child something, this is what I would want them to know?
I would want them to know that there is purpose in their story and that they absolutely have a story. Every single one of us has one. It doesn't mean that they're these big, monumentous things that are so clear. Like those stories are shaped in the little moments just as much as they're shaped in the big ones. And so not only would I want them to know that they have a story, but that they can use that story to help other people. And if they do that, it equals purpose. And
Yeah.
it definitely checks the perfectionism at the door.
I love that. And what does your shirt say, by the way? I know that y'all are listening to us.
There
but
is strength in your
strength.
story. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's a nonprofit that I love. It's called Scattered Joy. So I saw it and I saw their mission and I'm like, exactly. So
Me, I resonate 100%. Yeah.
yes, that's what I mean.
Yeah. Well, okay, Courtney, if people are like, you know what, I need to slow down. I need to embrace life. I need to understand how to tell my story more, and that involves purpose. And they are like, I need to get this Waggle Dance book. How can they find it, and how can they connect with you?
Yes. So the Waggle Dance is available everywhere. Books are sold. So Amazon, Target. I know we just missed Prime Day, but it's still there.
Oh, I know.
And then I'm on Instagram too at the underscore Waggle Dance. And I genuinely it just fills my cup to hear from people. There are reflective questions in the book. So I really
love a good
love
reflective question.
It's good for the soul. It is good for the soul. So I really genuinely love hearing from people and their spin on it or what they take away. So I would love to meet you there, I should say.
Okay, awesome. Well, guys, y'all go in and get the Waggle Dance, okay? Because I know some of y'all need to do some deep reflective work. I'm not calling out no names, but y'all know who you are. But anyways, in a good way, in a good way. I know y'all already on the path. Okay. But Courtney, I just want to acknowledge you and just say thank you so much for coming on today. But, to really taking the time to reflect while you were in the midst of things, but as you were going through things on how can I find purpose in my own journey? And then how can I take it a step further and, really try to extend the message to others that there is purpose in their story as well. And sometimes, we go through our own stuff and we just chalk it up to like, that's what happened to me. But it's sometimes a step further to then have that awareness of like, yeah, man, this is where I struggled with. And this is what I've learned through this journey. And this is what I want to share with others. Because I know something we talked about before we got on and push record today was that, you really have a desire to help people really feel not alone in their journey and that their story does matter. And so I just want to acknowledge you and appreciate you for coming on today and again, spreading this message.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you for creating the space to have the conversation. Really
yeah,
appreciate it.
absolutely. Well, guys, y'all know I'm going to leave y'all with something. And I'm now got to go get this Waggle Dance book and read it and do all the reflective questions so that I can reflect on my own life. But there's two things that I would love to leave you with that I'm taking from what Courtney said. And it's one, something that her grandma said, because it was your grandma that said it, Courtney, is, this too shall pass. And you can take that in a good way or in a like urgency way of like, how can I embrace the moments that I've been given today? But then also just to trust all of it. There is purpose in your story. And sometimes you just have to trust that the next page that's about to turn has some things that you don't even know yet, but just to trust all of it. Until next time.
That's all for today on Inspiring Possible. If you found a little inspiration today, please go on over to iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you tune in to listen to leave us a comment and rate us. Also, make sure and link up with me at inspiringpossible.com to get the free Dream It, Write It, Do It workbook. And don't forget to follow us on social media and share this with anyone who needs to be inspired. Remember, if you can believe it, it's possible.